Chemicals and waste and pollution issues, they're not just environmental issues. These are also issues deeply entwined with social justice. There's a long history of a waste trade that disadvantages and sometimes targets developing countries where they don't have the capacity to say no, and they don't have the capacity to manage this waste in a safe way. So these treaties seek to protect the environment. They have a really strong health aspect to them, but there's also a strong sense of Indigenous rights and social justice more broadly, because the idea is to help developing countries understand the risks, manage the risks, and if they feel they need to, say no and refuse to accept those risks. The meaning of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. These are three different treaties. They were negotiated at different times. They each have a different mandate, a different purpose. But in the last 10 years, they've started meeting all at the same time in what's called a triple COP. So it's been a really interesting, almost experiment in global governance in the last while. And it's really interesting to see because it shows that the UN can change, and that even as we address increasingly difficult issues, there's innovations that can help address those issues. It is the only global convention that deals with waste and hazardous waste. It looks at the trade between countries. So at the heart of it is something called a PIC procedure. This is meant to empower developing countries. They know exactly what's in a shipment, they know how to handle it and what the risks are, and they can say no. So it's a really important treaty to increase the information and the power for some of these importing countries. So a lot of the work that we're going to see just in a few weeks' time is to continue that work on plastic. They are developing environmentally sound management guidelines to help countries deal with the influx of plastic that every country's handling. It'll help them figure out, what is a safe way to manage all of this plastic. This treaty is also about trade and a PIC procedure for trade. But this time, instead of waste, it's about chemicals. It's about increasing information. It means developing countries will have information on how to safely manage this chemical. Maybe it's a pesticide, for example. A lot of them have been. And they can say no to importing, or they know how to handle it if they do import this chemical. So it's a really difficult treaty. And what we're going to see this year is a pretty big attempt to almost rewrite part of the treaty in a way. So there's a proposal to amend the convention itself so that you don't need all countries on board to list a chemical. You just need sort of a coalition of the willing. So expect a lot of procedural wrangling about whether this is acceptable, who needs to approve this, how it could be approved. But it's a very fundamental shift in how this convention has worked in the past. This is the only one that actually does ban or restrict chemicals. And that's because it is meant to address some of the most dangerous chemicals out there, because they have 4 criteria. So this treaty, the Stockholm Treaty, it has already taken action on forever chemicals. They are listed and they are subject to elimination, as in the convention language. So this is a really important treaty because it continues to address chemicals that are being used that have these 4 characteristics. So 2023 is a huge year for chemicals and for pollution more generally. The calendar is absolutely saturated with chemicals and waste-related meetings this year, more than we've seen maybe ever. We're living in cities that are increasingly becoming a danger to our health. We're finding increasingly polluted rivers. There's cities, even in the most developed countries in the world, where the residents can't drink the water. So increasingly, we're realizing that it's in our own interest to start to tackle pollution in a meaningful way.